great. Good friend of the program, friend of yours, the great Dave Pasch, joining us here on the show. Back in town to call Syracuse Clemson on Saturday, a 94 grad from Newhouse. Dave, great to have you on. How are you today?
I'm good. Paulie, as far as I know, still looks the same. His hair, so I don't know if that answers your question, but his hair is still exactly as I remember it some 20-plus years ago.
Yes, it does answer my question. He's been saying that he's an attractive person all day long, so I wanted to get the thoughts of somebody who knows him. Dave, you go ahead, Paulie.
I was going to ask Dave, when you were the voice of the Orange, we traveled, and I don't know why this conversation stuck in my head, because we're talking about why Clemson tickets aren't selling, and the perception maybe of Syracuse sports nationally. When you were the voice of the Orange, we discussed Arizona, Michigan, and Syracuse were three schools that you would love to call sports for because they won in the Big Two. And what do you think's happened to Syracuse, and where do they sit nationally now when you talk about things like that?
First of all, I do not remember that conversation, but I'll trust you. I'm putting my life on the line by trusting Paul Sevilla.
I mean, back then, Michigan, Arizona, and Syracuse were all good in both sports,
Oh yeah. No, you're right. And I just think it's I still feel like there's enough of a brand of Syracuse University because of the history, but obviously more important, the basketball, where you still get pretty good interest. I think that's, Syracuse, when they're decent, they're on ABC a lot. I still feel like there's a lot of interest nationally. I think sometimes maybe locally when things aren't as good, maybe people take them for granted, but I still feel like, there's enough buzz about the team. I didn't know that the tickets weren't selling. I just assumed that there are going to be a lot of people here this weekend with it being homecoming in Clemson here and the fact that Syracuse is 4-0. But I get it at the same time. People don't want to repeat of last year. They don't want to start great and finish poorly, and they want to make sure it's for real. And, there's, recently the last 15, 20 years since Paul Pasqualoni left, there's not a lot of consistency. So I understand it. You get your hopes up, and then you're let down. And, being an alum and then also, my 3 years here doing the games, I get that. I understand that.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting you say that, because last year, they started 6-0, they sold out a couple of games, and then you're right, the second half fizzled. This year, I mean, this is the biggest game on the home schedule. So if people aren't waiting for this one, and if people aren't going to this one, then what are they waiting for? Is the question we've been kind of dealing with throughout the show and really throughout the week. You mentioned it's homecoming. You're obviously an alum, Dave. How often do you make it back here to Syracuse? And you call games all over. Is it a little extra special to be back in Syracuse calling a game like this?
Oh, absolutely. I had a chance to speak to some students yesterday at Newhouse, and then I was just down at WAER earlier this morning, and it's funny, there's some old pictures in there, and I think when I found out I was doing this assignment, I was excited to come back because I have not done a football game here since I worked with Paulie in 2001. I've done a couple road games, but not a home game. I've done home basketball, but it's been almost a decade since I was back for that. So, it is special, man. It's fun. I think it'll be even more so just because, again, I've not done a football game. I think all of us, when we went to WAR, or maybe even, when I was the voice of the Orange, you kind of look down on that TV booth, that national TV booth, and hope one day you'd be in that booth. So it's cool. I won't lie. It's really cool. I'm sure once the game starts, I'll be fine, and it'll be, typical unbiased broadcast. But no doubt, it's great to be back.
One thing that Paulie and I disagreed on this week is how we think this game is going to go. And, I said that, there was a sense, I don't know, when, Syracuse has played Clemson over the last 10 years, that there were some games that, SU would have to play perfect. They would have to hope Clemson didn't play well, and then they had a chance. And I said to Paulie earlier in the week, I don't get the sense that is the case this time around. I don't think Syracuse needs to play perfect to win this game. What are your thoughts on this matchup, and do you agree with that? Are they a little closer this year than maybe past years?
I think they're closer. I do, just watching them and with the way Garrett Schrader is playing. I've had Clemson already. I did the Duke game where, Duke wasn't perfect by far, and it cost them the game. And then I watched the game last week against Florida State, and, they, again, played well enough to win, but made some mistakes and didn't win. And they've got a lot of talent, but if you look at their numbers, it's kind of shocking. They're not really productive on defense, and they've got a lot of studs on defense. I think if Clemson puts it all together and figures it out, they're good enough to win every other game on their schedule. But I am curious how they respond. Where is their psyche right now? They got to be a little rattled. They haven't been 0-2 in the ACC in 13 years.
Yeah, and they're out of the college football playoff mix too, which they're not used to being out of that discussion this early in the season. Do you anticipate a little bit of a hangover by the Tigers, or do you think it'll be kind of the flip side, and they're going to come here angry and wanting to take out their frustrations on somebody?
We talked to Dabo yesterday. It's early in the week, but he was really positive and said that the team is really positive. I don't know. You got some guys that could be in the NFL that came back. You've got guys that probably looked at transferring that were maybe not getting the playing time that they wanted that stayed. You wonder how those guys are feeling about things. You wonder about Cade Klubnik and where his confidence level is right now. That's why I say it feels like a big swing game to them. If Syracuse wins this game, Clemson could be 7-5. If Clemson wins this game, again, they're good enough to win every other game. They could end up having just 2 losses at the end of the year. So I think a lot of people made a big deal about the Garrett Riley hiring, and I understand why. He came in with obviously a lot of fanfare, and it has not been good so far offensively, or good enough. Wes Goodwin is somebody I know who was with the Cardinals for a little bit as an analyst, and that's a big job for him as the D coordinator. And again, you see 6 sacks in 4 games. You wonder, what do the players think right now of the play calling? Are they pointing fingers? Are they looking at the coaches? Dabo is great about positivity, but do we really know what it's like there? We might find out on Saturday based on the way they play.
Curious to get your thoughts on the state of SU football right now. And, a stat that we've been throwing out quite a bit, over the course of the last month or so is that, no head coach here at Syracuse has gone to back-to-back bowl games since Paul Pasqualoni. Syracuse football did it the end of the Marone era, first year of Schaefer, but the same coach hasn't done it, and obviously there's an opportunity to do that this year with Dino. What do you think about the state of the Syracuse program right now, and do you think they're moving in the right direction under Dino?
Yeah, I do. I think so. Again, last year, Schrader getting hurt, the way the Clemson game went, if they win that game, how does the rest of the year go? Do they end up, winning 9 or 10 games? I think this team's good enough to win 9. I don't see why not. Maybe more. I think the ACC, outside of Florida State, I think Louisville's good. I think North Carolina's good. I still think Clemson's good. Miami, I feel like the league is pretty good, but I don't. Even you could look at the opponents and say, yeah, Syracuse has not played great teams. That's fair, but their numbers are their numbers, and they're really good on both sides of the ball. And again, Schrader's playing really well. He's the key to me. If he's great and continues to ascend, then Syracuse can win a ton of games this year. Again, I think the big question is consistency year in, year out. NIL and the portal, those are where games are won now. That's the story of college football. Can Syracuse get kids from the portal that maybe, were backups at bigger schools, SEC schools? Can they get them to come here to get playing time? Do they have the resources with NIL? That's so much of what is driving college sports now, and that could be said for basketball as well. I think Red's done a good job with the portal, and I'm really curious to see how he does in year 1. I had a chance to see those guys briefly yesterday. So I think, that's really so much now of what it comes down to. And, how that plays out, we're going to see here in the next couple of years is, again, NIL and portal take center stage.
Another big picture thing, Dave, is you call a lot of Pac12 basketball games. And what do you make of the situation with what's going on the West Coast in the Pac-12?
Yeah, it's really sad. It's really unfortunate. It's, when SC and UCLA left, everybody kind of knew, okay, jockey for position, what's next? And I still think that's happening. It's probably happening at a place like Syracuse. It's happening everywhere because obviously the SEC and the Big Ten are the big winners. Certainly the Big Ten is right now. I think the SEC is going to probably, continue to excel and at some point look for expansion if they're not already. I think Brett Yormark and Jim Phillips are really good commissioners, but, they've got to be a little worried. And I think, presidents and ADs at schools in the ACC and Big 12 are still jockeying for position to see how this shakes out. Because it feels like at some point we're heading towards a Big 2. And what does that look like? I don't know. But, it's a sad state of affairs right now. It's, might be good for, revenue and ultimately good for the coaches and everything, and good for players with NIL. But I just wonder for fans, is it good? And maybe they're fine with it. They're going to watch the games no matter what. And maybe the matchups will continue to get better because of the strength of the leagues. But I think it's hard if you're a fan to follow everything. And it hasn't affected viewership. People are still watching the games. They're always going to watch the games. But Olympic sports, basketball even, those are the ones that are going to feel it the most.
Yeah, well said, Dave. 12 o'clock kick inside the Dome on Saturday. Yeah, Paulie.
For the record, I've never dyed my hair, Dave. It's
just naturally that good looking.
Never dyed my hair. Thank you.
It's all natural, Dave, just in case you were wondering. Enjoy your time back in Syracuse.
Rub it in, why don't you?
Enjoy your time back in Syracuse, Dave. Thanks so much for coming on. We do appreciate it. Have a great call on Saturday.
All right, guys. Take care. See you.
All right. Syracuse, Clemson, 12 o'clock kick on ABC. We'll, of course, have it locally for you on News Channel 9. And with that, we'll hit a timeout. 315-437-7644. We've got John Wildhack coming up in about 15 minutes. Coming to you live from Heritage Hill. We are back after this on ESPN Radio.